Have you ever considered that the obstacles in your life are not solid, immutable barriers, but rather phantoms that you yourself sustain? This isn't a metaphor. It is a description of a mechanism so fundamental to our existence that its oversight is the very reason we remain trapped. We have been taught to fight our demons, to wrestle with our problems, to wage war against our limitations. We believe this struggle is a sign of virtue, of responsibility. But what if this fight is the very act that gives our demons their strength? What if the energy you expend resisting your reality is the exact energy that reconstructs it day after day? You see, a problem requires a host. It is a parasite of consciousness. It cannot exist in a vacuum. It needs your attention to feed, your thoughts to give it form, and your belief to give it power. Every morning, you awaken and perform a subtle ritual. You scan your mental landscape to check on your problems. You feel the familiar weight of that financial worry, the dull ache of that relationship issue, the persistent shadow of that personal insecurity. In doing so, you are not merely observing them, you are watering them. You are renewing their contract of existence for another 24 hours. The universe, you see, is an impartial and incredibly efficient mirror. It does not judge what you show it. It does not distinguish between a deeply held fear and a profoundly felt desire. It simply reflects the truth of your inner state with perfect, unwavering fidelity. The constant contemplation of a problem is a declaration to the universe that this is who you are, and the universe, in its infinite obedience, agrees. At the very core of your being, before any identity was placed upon you by the world, there exists a silent, powerful awareness. This awareness is expressed through the two most creative words in any language: I am. These words are not a simple statement of fact. They are a statement that creates asterisk fact. They are the command prompt for reality. When your internal monologue says, I am struggling, you are not describing a situation, you are programming one. When you feel, I am unworthy, you are not expressing an emotion. You are casting a spell that solidifies that very experience. Consciousness is the only reality, and what you attach to your I am is what you decree into existence. For millennia, we have been conditioned to believe in external powers. We look to gods in the heavens, fate in the stars, or chance in the material world to explain the course of our lives. We saw ourselves as subjects, not as sovereigns. But the great secret, the one hidden in plain sight, is that the creative force is not out there. It is in you. Your own wonderful human imagination, your consciousness, is the god of your reality. There is no other. This realization is at once terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it places the full weight of your experience squarely upon your own shoulders. Liberating because it hands you the very tools of creation. So how do we stop feeding the things we do not want? It begins with a radical act of withdrawal. This is not denial. This is not spiritual bypassing or pretending the problem doesn't exist. It is a profound understanding of its nature. You cannot fight a shadow with your fists. You simply turn on the light. Withdrawing your attention from a problem is turning on the light. When the mind, out of habit, gravitates toward the familiar groove of worry, you consciously redirect it. You do not argue with it. You do not scold it. You simply choose not to energize it. At first, the problem may scream for your attention. Like a spoiled child being ignored, it may throw a tantrum, creating even more apparent chaos in your world to lure you back into the familiar drama. This is a critical juncture. This is the test. If you remain resolute, if you refuse to feed the phantom with your focus, it begins to starve. Its lines blur, its emotional charge weakens, it loses its density in your reality until one day you look for it and it has simply dissolved. It did not go anywhere. It was never truly there to begin with. It was only a persistent pattern of thought that you had mistaken for a solid wall. Time does not heal. The withdrawal of attention does. Think of a painful breakup from a decade ago. Its power over you today is negligible, not because of the passage of time, but because you stopped dedicating thousands of hours of mental real estate to it. You starved it into non-existence. This act of withdrawal creates a vacuum, a sacred emptiness within your consciousness. But nature abhors a vacuum. This space must and will be filled. If you are not conscious about what you fill it with, the old patterns or their close relatives will rush back in to occupy the familiar territory. This is where the second and more profound act of creation begins. You have cleared the canvas. Now you must paint a new masterpiece. And you do this not by asking, hoping, or wishing, but by assuming. You must dare to assume that you are already the person you wish to be, even as your senses and your bank account and your current circumstances scream otherwise. This is the great paradox and the ultimate test of faith. The world says, "Show me, and then I'll believe." The law of consciousness says, "Believe me, and then I'll show you." The reflection in the mirror cannot smile first. You must smile, and then the reflection has no choice but to obey. If you are experiencing lack, you must, in the quiet temple of your own mind, assume the feeling of abundance, not the frantic thought, "I want to be abundant," which only reinforces your lack, but the serene, quiet knowing, "I am abundant." You walk, talk, and think from this state. How would the abundant version of you view this bill? How would the healthy version of you approach this day? How would the loved version of you interact with others? You are not pretending. You are accessing a reality that already exists as a potential within the quantum field of all possibilities. By assuming its reality, you are selecting it, collapsing the wave function, and beginning the process of drawing it into your three-dimensional world. The rational mind will call this delusion. It will point to all the evidence of your current reality and demand that you be realistic. But realism is the prison of the past. It is the worship of what has already been created. Creation does not come from realism. It comes from a bold and daring imagination that is willing to feel what is not yet physically present. Your internal assumption, when persisted in, is the seed. The physical world is merely the soil in which it will inevitably sprout. The period between planting this seed and its eventual harvest is what could be called the bridge of incidence. During this interval, this sacred delay, nothing may seem to happen on the outside. This is the wilderness. This is where faith is forged into fact. Most people abandon their new state here. They plant the seed of being healthy, but after a few days of feeling no different, they dig it up to see if it's growing. They declare themselves prosperous, but when an unexpected bill arrives, they immediately revert to the old identity of lack and fear. They have not understood that the external world is a lagging indicator. It is the echo of a sound that has already been made in the halls of consciousness. To keep checking the outside world for proof is to continually reintroduce the old state and neutralize the new one. Persistence in your assumption is the key, not a forceful, anxious persistence, but a calm, knowing occupancy of the new state. It is a quiet confidence. When you truly assume a new identity, you don't need to shout it from the rooftops. You don't need to convince yourself with endless affirmations. You simply are it. There is a profound peace in this knowing, and as you persist, something magical begins to happen. The world, which seemed so solid and unchangeable, begins to reconfigure itself around your new conviction. People will say things they wouldn't have said before. Opportunities will appear as if from nowhere. You'll have an idea or a lucky break. These are not accidents. This is the universe rearranging the furniture of your reality to match the new blueprint you've provided. This is the bridge of incidents, a series of seemingly natural events that leads you inevitably to the physical manifestation of your assumed state. You could never have planned the route. Your logical mind is far too limited to conceive of the infinite pathways available. Your only job is to remain faithful to the destination, the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The how is not your concern. The how is the domain of a power infinitely wiser than your conscious mind. The ultimate challenge in this entire process is the final act of letting go. You must be willing to completely abandon the old you. You cannot live in two realities simultaneously. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot keep your attention on the problem and simultaneously inhabit the solution. You must choose the house you will live in. This is a divorce from your old self. You must let that person go with all of their familiar stories of suffering, limitation, and victimhood. It can feel like a death, because in a way, it is. The ego has built a strong identity around its problems. There's a strange comfort in known suffering. The new state, the promised land, is unknown territory. This is why people will declare they want change, but they will cling to the chains of their old identity. They want prosperity, but they will not stop inhabiting the consciousness of poverty. They want love, but they will not abandon the feeling of being unwanted. The choice must be absolute. You walk through the door into your new reality and you close it behind you. You don't look back. You don't entertain the ghosts of the past. You let the dead bury the dead. When you do this, when you make that definitive internal shift, the change is irreversible. The old bonds dissolve from lack of energy, and the new state flourishes because it is now your natural home. The moment it feels more natural to be abundant than to be poor, to be healthy than to be sick, to be loved than to be lonely, that is the moment the floodgates open. The world has no choice but to conform to your new nature. It was never the world that needed to change. It was you. The problems you were trying so desperately to solve were never the issue. They were symptoms of the internal state you were occupying. By changing the state, you don't solve the problems. They simply become irrelevant. They cease to exist because the consciousness that created them is no longer active. You are quite literally a new person living in a new world. So look at your life right now. What are you reflecting in the grand mirror of existence? What identity are you wearing so consistently that the universe must confirm it for you at every turn? Is it the identity you would consciously choose? The power to change the reflection has always been yours. It is not a technique you learn. It is a truth you awaken to. The creative power that imagined galaxies and sculpted stars resides within you, waiting for your direction. It operates through your faith, your feeling, your assumption. So what will you assume? What reality will you decree with the authority of your I am? Do not hope for a better future. Assume it now, feel it now, live from it now. For now is the only moment of creation there is. And in this eternal now, you are the sole author of your story. Write a magnificent one.